Okay, we are live.
Well, hello everybody and welcome to our ISE Fireside Webinar. Today's topic is working from anywhere and what it means for information security and IT pros. We're absolutely thrilled to have Banyan Security as our sponsor today, and they are a new customer of ours, so we are happy to welcome into the T.E.N ISE family. Before we get started, I'd like to kind of go over the agenda with everybody and a few housekeeping items. So we're going to begin, of course, our webinar at 2 o'clock, and then we'll have our panelist introductions shortly thereafter. And let me tell you, we have a really great panel. Before we even got on the call today, we are talking about making this webinar very spicy. So I'm going to have you guys live up to that task. And then we'll have some great discussions. We've got 3 subtopics for us to kind of run through today. And I think it's going to be just absolutely wonderful. And I'm looking forward to our discussions. And then, of course, we always want to hear from you. So 2:35, we will answer your questions on the air. But as you think of them, please enter them into the Q&A chat window. And we'll sign off at 2:45 so you can go ahead and be ready for your 3 o'clock meeting. Couple of other quick things to make mention of. You will earn a CPE credit for participating in today's ISE Fireside webinar. You will need to join us for the webinar in its entirety. To enter your CPE information, you will do so by completing the survey, and we will send you your certificate in via email by tomorrow so that you can make your own deposits into your continuing education accounts. So again, we want to make sure that you are continuing your education and how that process works. So let's go to the fun part of our introductions of our panelists today. Adrian, I'm going to ask you to start and share a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Marci. Yep, my name is Adrian Dunn. I'm a Senior Director of IT at Nextrol. We are a growth marketing firm based out of here in San Francisco. I was educated in Ireland, University of Limerick, and I moved to America, New York, and I worked for Accenture for about 12, 13 years maybe. Worked from the ground up, basically doing tech support, and ended up running a senior leadership, executive support, premium support program. Managed all the offsite events and so on and so forth. So I got a very good flavor of networking and sort of remote access just way back then in the early 2000s. Then I moved to the Bay Area and I worked for a bunch of startups here, and that I transitioned then into my current role. That's it.
Well, thanks, Adrian. It's good to have you here. Oh, did you want to add something else?
No, that's all. That's enough.
Okay, good deal. And Vince, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Thanks for joining us as well today.
Sure. Hi, I'm Vince Perez from Carta. I'm the manager for information security. So I handle a lot of the GRC stuff as well as Okta and a lot of other corporate security items. And I'm also customer facing. Similar to Adrian, I started off in the IT trenches. I was a database administrator, sysadmin, and so on. I've always gotten thrown into security because nobody else wanted to do it. So it's always been something that I've always done inadvertently because I've been told that I just know what to do. And I've professionally turned security about 5 years ago.
Well, we're glad to have you here today. And Tarun, we'd love to have you introduce yourself. And then also we'd love to hear a little more about what Banyan Security does.
Awesome. Thank you, Marci. You know, this is an extraordinary time for all of us. So I'm really grateful that we can put this session together, have Adrian and Vince on, and also the audience that we have. So just by way of introduction, my name is Tarun Desikan. I'm one of the co-founders of Banyan. I started my career in networking. So we were building these big optical networking boxes in the early 2000s. If you guys remember, before the dot-com bubble burst, everyone thought that was going to be the next big thing. And the crazy part is that's how we get internet today, is fiber to the home. So that's where I started my career, and kind of over the years kind of moved into different fields. And most recently, we've been at Banyan for the last few years, building a platform to enable work from anywhere. And so the idea we started Banyan with, this was a few years ago, before COVID was a thing, was that more and more people want to be able to accomplish their job no matter where they are. So they don't need to be in the office. They don't need to be necessarily at a physical location. They might be in the beach, and they need to get their work done. In the last year, COVID has changed so many things for us. And I think we all know that we're seeing this massive shift to remote work. Now, I think there are a few things that are kind of non-obvious, though. The first, we have noticed is that the status quo with respect to human capital has changed. At Banyan, we're San Francisco based, just like Adrian and Vince. We used to hire primarily in the Bay Area, but that's just not an option anymore. So today we just hire the best people wherever we find them. The latest hire I made was in Hungary. And I think other companies are doing the same thing. There's an increased reliance on a remote workforce and remote work. And I think this is kind of a once in a lifetime change. I think we're going to see more of gig workers, more of contractors and so on becoming part of the workforce, something we haven't seen before, something that's not going to change. And I think when you look at the IT and the security side, that has real ramifications there. All these manual processes we used to do, all the traditional attack vectors, it's all just gotten amplified. And so I think we almost have to rethink, how do we deal with a world where there's people coming and going all the time, where you really need people to be productive on day one, or you're not going to be able to, enable them to succeed. And also security, you can get attacked because of stale credentials. So these are the challenges I think we're going to see a lot of, and I'm very excited to have Banyan, because this is exactly the challenges. I'm not really excited about why we landed up here, but this is why the product was built. So I'm excited to chat with Vince and Adrian on the challenges they're seeing and how they're tackling it.
Well, thank you very much. What a perfect segue for our first topic, Tarun. Our first topic today is actually going to be the strategic implications of working from anywhere. And as you definitely mentioned, the pandemic has really drawn a hard line between companies that have figured out how to operate remotely and companies that have just had to figure out how to operate or didn't make it at all, sadly. And those that have remaining really have had a societal shift out there in that there's strategic implications that we have to contend to on a broad scale. On a positive note of all this, what we really have seen is the workforces out there really being innovative, and companies are able to even hire from a larger global talent pool because they're not limited by locations, commutes, and geographies. And it's also really great for the environment, as we're also starting to learn. But conversely, there's some more complicated security challenges that have been confronted with us, along with the loss of community and being able to connect with people in person. So we have to work a lot harder out there to provide fine-grained controls so that we can build meaningful relationships, maintain our connections. We've been doing a lot of that through digital, but we also have to be operating in a secure and safe manner. And I'll throw one more element out there to the mix. Many of us have had face-to-face marketing and sales kind of roles overall. And, we're not selling in person anymore. We're selling a lot virtually. So, but we're finding also, that there's some convenience to that. You're not getting on airplanes, time saving, and there's more efficiency. Obviously, we're still missing some of that human contact. But again, with the deck of cards has really been shuffled for all of us. And many of us have really done a great job of adapting, but there's still lots of things to discover. So Adrian, I'm going to start with you. What was the state of work from anywhere in the prior in the pandemic? Was your company always, prior to the pandemic, I should say, office-based, or did you have a hybrid of where you could work from home? I know you are, based on the West Coast, and commuting is never the easiest thing out there. So what did your office, environment look like?
Yeah, we were very office centric. We based a lot of our culture around being in the office and participation through the office. And we're a global company, and we have offices in Europe, in Asia, scattered across North America. And so very much from a cultural, if you were to go to our website pre-pandemic, we would really emphasize the office, all those sexy pictures of people walking around offices. I think there was an element that was starting to shift in terms of our hiring, especially within the engineering and InfoSec teams, whereby we were looking more remotely, just because of the challenges with talent, as Tarun had mentioned, and the technology was there to support getting that access. So a little bit of a change had started pre-pandemic, but obviously since, to expand on that, since pandemic, we've had a full 180 shift, and we've come out and told our employees we are now very much a hybrid model of what we used to be, focused on 3 areas: exclusively remote as an employee, a hybrid between you go in a few days a week, and then what we consider an office employee, which will be someone that wants to be in the office 3 or plus days. So it's been quite a shift.
And Vince, in contrast to, has the pandemic changed your firm's view from working from anywhere? And has this been a good shift or bad perception? I see you have a background of an office at one time, and I know you're not working there now. Just kind of fill us in.
Yeah, so for Carta, the stance that we're generally taking is we're going to go back into the office. So before pandemic, we had offices in Brazil, in Canada, in New York. So we hired again in those areas. In general, I think we're going to do that, but I feel that there's going to be a little bit more flexibility when it comes to hiring more remote workers, or just saying like, hey, if you can come into the office more frequently or less frequently. I think that there's going to be more of that shift towards that paradigm.
Wonderful. And Tarun, you've kind of touched about this in your introduction. Has the work from anywhere model changed your organization's view of human capital? And I want you to dive in a little bit deeper about anticipating leveraging those temporary consultants, or there's contractors, gig workers, and if you think companies like yours or your clients there might be, leveraging that more in the post-pandemic world.
Yeah, but before I jump into the answer, I think for someone who's works or runs a work from anywhere company, I really want to be in the office. Personally, I have 2 small kids at home. You probably hear them in this webinar. There's going to be a 1-year-old who comes in here and is going to yell. And it's so hard for me to just have a good cadence during the workday. You just want to go cuddle that baby and just play with her. So I really look forward to getting to the office because that clearly articulates my start of the day and the end of the day. And I really miss the camaraderie we used to have when you just go run into someone. I really miss that. Now, having said that, we ourselves, we couldn't go into the office. So I've learned to live with this, and now I'm kind of liking no commute. I used to spend 40 minutes getting to the office. There's no commute, and I can just take a break in the middle of the day and go do something. And so I really like all that. I think as a company, we've changed. We were a young company, so we really wanted everyone to come into the office and get to know each other and build that culture. But we've adjusted. And I think more and more companies, even the large ones, are doing the same thing. And more specifically, we've now started saying, we want to find the best person. It doesn't matter where they are. And I think that just freed up how we look for people, especially when talent is tight, especially in engineering teams. That's been quite a remarkable change for us.
Well, to that point, just real quick before we transition to the next topic, what about from a sales perspective? You guys are an enterprise play. Do you think you might be going back to face-to-face selling, or continuing kind of having, go-to meetings, Zoom meetings, or whatever platform does your, your sales team versus, having that in-person experience?
Yeah, I think even before the pandemic, we started noticing the shift where people were just more efficient, saying, hey, just let's hop on a Zoom call and let's just talk about what we need to talk about. And I do believe there is still a place for face-to-face. I personally, especially if you're working in complicated environments, you need to meet the other person to understand and build that trust. I think there's still a place, but I think the world has changed. We're not going back to standard face-to-face. I genuinely believe 90% of what we can do will be done remotely. You will not be jumping on the plane to go, as a vendor, to pitch a customer exactly what we do. They're also going to be biased, saying just do it over Zoom and come, maybe when we're ready to sign the contract or something like that. I think the world has really changed. And I don't think we're going back.
Vince, what about you? Do you think we'll be going back anytime soon to like a face-to-face model? And was your company like that before?
Yeah, so like what I was saying earlier, we were a face-to-face company, and I think we'll continue on.
Oh, I know you were in the office, but from a selling perspective.
From a selling perspective, I think for us, our target markets were, we were able to sell, be it remote or face-to-face. I think the products that we had gave us that flexibility before COVID. I was going to chime in on Tarun and say, hey, how about my free lunch, Tarun? That's the thing I miss most about vendor calls, right? It's like, hey, let's go grab lunch and then just talk about the product and let's grab something. Let's grab a bite to eat. I hope that that's still in play, just because, again, that's what Tarun was saying. It builds a relationship. You bring the guard down. You have a conversation with someone, and then you can actually open up and see what else is missing. It's like, oh, you guys were actually looking at that. We don't sell it, but a good friend of mine does. Would you be interested?
Yeah, and those water cooler conversations, I call them water cooler, which is the impromptu discussions. Those are kind of hard in Zoom, right? In Zoom, you have to come with an agenda and go 1, 2, 3. No one just hangs out to chat or have lunch.
Absolutely. Adrian, was your company's business model in person in terms of connecting with customers, or was it always, telemarketing and everything like that?
Yeah, I think there was a balance between the two. We're selling a product, so it helps for us to be in front of a screen and pitch the product and do demos real time and all that sort of stuff. So I think a large part of our sales org leaned heavily into that area. But we all know sales folks, they want to get out and get that lunch going. And I'm Vince, I'm the complete opposite of you. I absolutely hated those lunch meetings because I was always like, they're taking too long, and I don't, I'm the black sheep in regards to that. I just want to be sold and get on with it, But Marci, I think what's interesting is, Tarun touched on this earlier. I report into the CFO, and in many ways, it won't really matter what we think in terms of face-to-face or not face-to-face. The technology is there that says we don't need to get on a plane anymore. And the data is already being built that you can sell perfectly fine without the face-to-face. And so I think a lot of it will be, companies will look at their bottom line and say, wow, we're really able to stay afloat and in many ways improve productivity and sales in the remote environment. So I think the CFO will knock on the door there as well. You got to factor him or her in.
So it's going to be the kids versus the CFO. It's like, I need to leave the house versus the CFO.
Yeah.
Well, let's just shift gears to our next topic, which is the role of remote access in a work from anywhere strategy. Now, we're just way past the emergency now of everyone trying to get online and be working remotely. And that was quite the triage affair. For a lot of companies, it was a 48-hour, 72-hour window to get everybody from working in an office to working from home. And we had to take a lot of shortcuts in, things that had to go to the wayside. But what, really stood out to me was actually those that were put the cloud first really had a head start. So the infrastructure of just where they were working really was kind of no big deal. At the end of the day, it's just kind of moving your devices around and setting up shop. And so that kind of gave a lot of companies certainly a head start that really were, forward thinking as it related to the cloud. So, Adrian, I want to ask you this. How important is remote access from work from anywhere? Because, now we are truly working from anywhere. Where does remote access, you think, transformation might go, or migration? And how does that fit really in the scheme and IT security priorities for your company? And I'll just say, is one of the, I don't know, positive things about the pandemic, like you truly can work from anywhere. So home doesn't necessarily mean where you're working from. I've had, friends go to like a resort community because their kids are learning remotely, they're working remotely. So there's a little bit of change of scenery of being, been in the house, for days on end. So it just kind of, changed things up for some people. So Adrian, tell us where your head is at on working from home from anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's P1 for us. It has been for, the last, however, I mean, you touched on it, the initial, oh crap moment where you've got to migrate an entire company from an office-based environment to an at-home-based environment. And you sort of, you pray for a week that will go off smoothly. And absolutely, Marci, you're right. Those that were already in the cloud space, that was quite an easy transition. Personally, for our company, I felt like it was an easy transition. We were a Google shop and we had a lot of stuff already in place. Phones, ironically enough, were our stumbling block because we still had a very legacy sort of PBX-based phone system that didn't migrate over very well. We weren't really happy with the soft phone solution of our provider at the time. But then as you expand and analyze, the longevity of this and the cultural shift that's happening, then you've got to reassess your position from just that initial reactionary point to a longevity game. And so, we essentially, like I mentioned, P1 for IT has been getting that footprint right, getting that remote access environment, be it cultural, hardware-based, security, obviously, and just functionality. All of those. The umbrella of all of those is critical to what we've been focusing on, and the living rooms has become the office, or the Starbucks has become the office, but also in many ways the home router has become the server room now. So you have this very strange and yet wonderful sort of complete reversal of where you were 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, where it was very much let's build a perimeter around what we've got. I never cared about anyone's home router in many ways. I was whacking a VPN on top of it, and I was sort of, see you later. I don't want to get into that space. You can't really do that anymore. You have to sort of realize that that's now part of your network.
Vince, what types of solutions are you using to enable the remote access now? And have you seen any vulnerabilities that might be out there that, are you finding any challenges in mitigating any security gaps?
Again, we're using Cisco Umbrella for DNS. We had that in our offices. Now we're rolling that out on the local machine, so it does protect us from specific malware calling home. That's one of the tools to kind of help us bring the fence closer, the barrier closer to the end users. In terms of like vulnerabilities per se, I mean, it's kind of the same before COVID. Like for us as a company, we had VPN. People were able to log in remotely and do their work. So we were a cloud first company, and it made it easier. Similar to Adrian, the transition was hard, but it wasn't as hard as a lot of other folks. And an interesting aside on that is some people bring their laptops home, and now they only have a laptop to watch Netflix. And if you're shoving all your traffic through your tunnel, now you have Netflix traffic on top of all your other traffic. So those companies may not have been prepared for those. Luckily for us, we were transitioning to Banyan, so we didn't see too much of that. But I've heard of stories where when everyone went from home, started working from home, the VPNs just started to shut down just because of those instances.
the overflow.
Yeah, I mean, it's just everyone's watching YouTube, Netflix on their laptops because, yeah, they got nothing else to do.
Yeah,
I would be pretty concerned if Vince was judging my Netflix preferences.
Well, this actually is a good point for Tarun, though. I see you as a visionary. You co-founded Banyan Security. And so what do you think the role of the remote access is going to look like, over the next year? Vince kind of touched on it, that the VPNs can't really hold up. Their lack of better words, they crapped out at a lot of different companies. Because they couldn't handle the volume of traffic coming in at the same time. So, what do you see on the horizon for today's challenges and even tomorrow's problems?
Yeah, I personally, I started my career building these networking solutions. So we know how we thought about when we built it. And we really wanted to see your Netflix videos. We wanted all traffic to come through our routers. Like we designed it that way. And I think when we started Banyan, one of the things we realized was that fundamental assumption is false. At least in my philosophy, I don't think my company wants to know what movies I'm watching. I don't think they really care, right? But what they do care about is if there's a corporate resource, if it's a sensitive resource, they want it logged. They want to know when you accessed it, and they want to make you productive when you access it. So that is, I mean, we didn't know COVID would be a thing when we started Banyan, but this problem existed well before COVID. Right? Those traditional network boxes that we built back in the day, I wanted your Netflix videos to come through me. I wanted the Zoom videos to come through us. And many times I would host the Exchange server for your email. Right? And that was the world that it was built for. But when we started looking at the ecosystem, everyone's documents are in the cloud and everyone's emails are in Gmail. Who would have thought? All our corporate email is in Gmail. 10 years ago, that would have not been possible. And so, but nothing had changed with respect to how the network traffic was being routed. And so I do think that if you really want to enable work from anywhere and you want to enable it for a large workforce, you have to rethink some of those fundamental building blocks. So that I think is really important. The other thing I do believe is that people will come back to the office. Now, work from anywhere, we very specifically called it work from anywhere and not work from home. Because I personally want to go back to that office. I can hear my kid crying. I'm like, please stop. But I want to go back to the office. And just because I'm in the office, I shouldn't get some new security privileges. We should have the same security model, whether you're at home or you're in the office. And I would like the employees to be empowered to make security happen regardless of where they're working, home or office or coffee shop. So I do see that philosophy as required to enable kind of a work from anywhere, remote access philosophy for organizations. I'd be curious if Adrian, Vince, you guys agree.
Just to jump onto that, Marci, the mindset is the exact same for me and for us, in that if something different happens in the office, even if it's a good thing in many ways, we're ready to pull it out, because there shouldn't be any distinction between Starbucks and the office anymore. There's no point to it. The world has changed, and so you don't need that perimeter. It's we're a cloud-based. We don't have the traditional resources sitting in there that we need to hunker down and protect. And so I agree 100% with Tarun when he says, yes, we want to go back to the office, but it doesn't matter that it's the office. It's just a bigger
that's just the physical space of things, right? That's just the physical of where you're at. Yeah. But your computer and how you're using your computer and what it's accessing should not matter if you're sitting in a conference room with Starbucks, an airport, or at the beach, at the end of the day, because you should have the same controls in place no matter where you are. That's, to me, very logical, but it's taken how many years for us to get there, to kind of think with that mindset, and maybe it took a pandemic as well. But I'm going to shift us over actually to our next topic, which is really kind of where we're starting to touch about it, but really entering the zero trust access model. And that's really, where our security environments certainly have evolved, and our mindset here has just evolved. So it's just keeping us protected against intrusions. And, zero trust has become a much more hot topic now and more established and understood as a sound, actually, security principle. But it still has to have gone through some advancements like any emerging type of technology and evolution. And to deploy zero trust effectively, you really have to think about it from like a borderless security perspective, and kind of how we just equated it. If the physical state of where you are doesn't really matter so much, it's the same information and the same kind of work that you're doing, regardless of your, where you're physically being located. So let's go ahead and sort of dive in here. Tarun, maybe you could, for those that are sort of new out there to the concept of zero trust, because it is a newer thought. I mean, it's not old. Tell us about some of the just sort of the basic fundamentals of zero trust, just to kind of get everyone in the same terminology.
Zero trust is both a buzzword and kind of a new concept. It's funny, right? It's used to say so many things, and yet most people don't know what it is. But I think the fundamental concept was that, traditionally, if you were in the office, you could access everything. You're in a trusted network. Zero trust says it doesn't matter where you're located. I'm going to authenticate you as the user. I'm going to authenticate the device. I'm going to make sure you're accessing the correct application, so you're authorized to access it, and I encrypt all traffic. So it's a very simple concept which says, I'm not going to assume any trust. You have to assert it, and then I'll give you access. And more organizations need this, specifically things like older companies that don't have a cloud-first architecture, because a lot of times breaches occur because the people you trust the most get compromised. So it might be a trusted contractor or a trusted administrator, and you just trust them because they're in the office, but because they don't have to assert that trust, assert that identity, someone compromises them, and now they have unfettered access to your environment. So by making sure every access is explicitly authenticated and authorized, you establish security. That's kind of the geeky zero trust spiel. The non-geeky one is zero trust is just the right way to do access. If you were to design it from day one, this is how you would do it. We just come from a different world. That's about it.
So Vince, I'm going to ask a follow-up question here. You talked about some of what you heard in terms of challenges out there with people having overloading the networks and the VPNs as it relates to the traffic, because they were watching Netflix and all sorts of things. But what other challenges have you seen out there as it relates to the implementing zero trust? And then maybe some of the pluses as well. I always like to look at the glass half full, but learning lessons, of what's, in being realistic to me is how you forge ahead.
To Tarun's point, lack of knowledge of what zero trust is. It's there's so many documentation or blogs out there saying like, this is what zero trust is supposed to be. You implement it and you do it wrong, or it's not the way that zero trust is designed. I mean, yeah, I'll leave it like that. That's fundamentally where I kind of see it. What was the second question?
Well, just some of the benefits, is it more reliable overall? As your end users having a better experience of logging in and just being able to see the same things that they're able to see regardless of where they're at?
If you do zero trust properly, the user shouldn't really notice or see. So on our side, on the engineering side, they had to do some tweaks, but for the finance and the HR side, it's just accessing the web page and it just works. On the back end, specifically on the security side, we have better control. Like we trust but verify. Right now we know because you have to have our MDM installed and make sure that. If you have the MDM installed, you can access the Banyan, and it kind of works together because now we control the laptop, we control the user. It's tied through Okta. We have better understanding and verification of the user. So there's a lot of benefit for us on that side.
So it really seems like Banyan for you and Zero Trust has commingled really well into your existing architecture, and even more, you enhanced it. That's pretty what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that's correct. It's just we've expanded a lot of the use cases for Banyan in our implementation.
That's awesome. So Adrian, has there been resistance at your end, or has it just been a really, like really positive experience for everybody?
Uh, there's always resistance to change, and it's always multiplied when engineers are at the front of that line and affected by that change the most. So yeah, resistance is inevitable. To highlight what Vince says, I think going in with the foresight of educating the end user is key to mitigating that resistance. But also, if you build it out right, there's an ease of use that you gain as part of it. So that helps the resistance incredibly, you know. But there are challenges. There's no way of avoiding those. And you know, a big part of what I discovered was one of the key challenges is that you're carrying three departments together to implement this. You know, there's a DevOps team that are running a lot of the backend stuff. There's a security team that are prioritizing the security side of it, and then there's an IT team that personally I think is sort of advocating for the end user a lot and the end user device a lot. And you have to move all three of those departments together and balance everyone's desires at the right moment. But you know, it's sort of the technology, the timing for the technology is perfect because you know the traditional protecting the building is gone. You've lost that control. And so you need to go back to trying to figure out where can I start the control? And it starts with the end user, you know, getting that trust, the trust score basically. So your end user, trusting your end user, and then trusting your device. And if you can build up from that, I think, because those are the only variables that we can control now.
Absolutely. And Tarun, do you want to just sort of have a quick word before we transition in the Q&A?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think Adrian made a great point, right? There's a convergence, you know, and I think this is what the remote world, work from anywhere world has done, where three very different teams, IT, security, and DevOps, kind of have to work together to enable a real work from anywhere experience for the employees. It can't just be one team's job anymore. And I think companies that recognize that convergence and companies where the teams work well together to enable this, I think they do a great job. While companies that still operate in silos, it's much harder for them. You know, the VPN guys want their VPN, the DevOps guys want their bastions, the IT guys keep their Oktas, and they don't really play nicely with each other. And that makes it very challenging. So as a vendor, you know, we spend a lot of time trying to build a product that's easy. And as Adrian and Vince know, it doesn't always happen on the first iteration, but that's our goal, and we want to get there. And I just want to make one more comment, which is in many customers, they don't quite have the right expectations when they hear about Zero Trust. Zero Trust is not one and done, you know, it's kind of more of a journey. And oftentimes I hear, we should have started Zero Trust last year. If it started Zero Trust last year, we'd be golden today. And it just, there's an Indian saying, it's like, you know, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So that when I hear, you know, we should have started Zero Trust a year ago, I'm like, you can still start. It's still going to be good for you. And I find that very interesting.
Well, excellent. Well, very insightful conversation, and looks like our audience has some questions for us. I'm going to start with from Diego Santana. Are you going to split tunnel VPN route? And if so, which traffic do you offload to the ISP? Who would like to take that on? Maybe Tarun, would you like to try to take that on?
I think Adrian and Vince would be better for this, either of them.
Okay. Oh, Vince, do you want to go for this?
Yeah, I was going to say, so we're running Banyan, so it's naturally split tunnel, right? Like we're only shoving traffic that we need to go to our AWS cloud. So everything else goes straight to your ISP.
Okay, so like if somebody is watching Netflix from their computer,
yeah,
and then working,
yeah,
splitting like that type of thing. Oh, that's awesome.
It's I think Marci, it's a philosophy.
Yes.
You know, as an IT organization. Yeah, Adrian, maybe you can cover that philosophy.
Well, again, it's that mindset of changing from what you understand to be a traditional VPN to, you know, the Zero Trust layer is really not about that. sure, there's aspects of it, of course, about the movement of traffic and whatnot, but it's really about the trust piece of it. Do I trust the person and the device? And then granular access, least privilege wrapped around that. So if I'm on Netflix, nobody cares. We've already established we don't care what that is. So, you just move on to the next thing,
And in the old days, you didn't spend the time establishing the trust of the user and the device. So you had to see that Netflix video to make sure that it wasn't malicious. Like you had to, right? Then you would block potentially malicious traffic and allow non-malicious traffic. But in the new days, if you put strong trust in the device, strong trust in the user, you can trust them to surf Netflix. Like, what do you care if they're watching Netflix? I mean, do you guys care what they're watching on their corporate devices? Do you have a corporate policy on that?
No, and it's one of the questions that I get asked all the time. It's like, are you guys looking at what I'm doing? And I think that, the folks think that there's 10 IT guys in a room doing nothing but looking at logs. Like there's no benefit to this, it's sort of an inside joke. Vince is laughing. I'm sure he gets that sort of commentary all the time. We're not wasting our time doing it. Obviously, there's checks and balances in place, but there's no big brother aspect that there's no benefit to that big brother aspect,
From Randy Harold, how are you providing education awareness to you and your users? So we sort of touched on it, but we didn't actually kind of dive into that. Does anyone want to sort of jump into that question? We've got a few questions left and a little amount of time, so I just want to kind of go through them as quickly as possible so we can cover them. Does anyone have any thoughts about how are you?
In my environment, I don't mean to pick on engineers, but I sort of categorize the end users as twofold: an engineer and then a non-engineer. And oftentimes the non-engineer is more concerned about less, if you will. Does it work? Great. Okay. Can I ignore it? Great. On we go. The engineer wants to understand what's going on in the background because it oftentimes affects their config and whatnot, and their day-to-day stuff. So I think you should manage that education in two ways. You should sort of have a siloed deep dive with your engineering departments or product, whoever wants to be involved in that, and really get into the granular and get that understanding across of, Tarun said it earlier, if we could build security from day one, this is how we should have built it. It's just that the technology is there now for us to support it, right? So we're doing it right for the first time. I 100% agree with that this is how I would have built it from day one, that point system of access. And so I think you balance the education around who the audience is. And for me, there's a distinct line drawn around that engineering bubble and the rest of the end users.
And I just want to do one more question from Tom Ray. We are trying to provide a similar and same look and feel where everyone is working, but how else are you providing equity across the positions that are requiring presence on site for field, call center, and those positions open to less present IT engineer types of folks? So anyone want to tackle that real quick before we wrap up?
I can take a stab. I think, we are all very biased here. We are knowledge workers, our companies are software, knowledge-based companies. So we have the luxury of on day one, being able to work remotely. But in the service sector, restaurants, hospitals, in the medical sector, that's just not an option, right? You have to go on site. I think the same philosophies also apply when you go on site, but it is applied differently. And we didn't touch upon some of those challenges in this conversation. Their physical security becomes a lot more important. Specifically, devices that can be, anybody can come in and manipulate them. So there are different concerns. The zero trust philosophy still apply. It's not necessarily a work from anywhere kind of security that you need, but it's a different kind of security, different kind of zero trust.
Well, thank you very much, Tarun. Thank you, Vince, and thank you, Adrian. We are thrilled to have all of you with us today and to share your knowledge. I had a lot of fun. I hope it was spicy for you guys. Was it spicy?
Curry.
Yes.
There was a lot of questions that were asked, and unfortunately we ran out of time in answering those questions. So I really would encourage you guys to reach out to Tarun, have some of your questions answered. There's definitely some interest for sure on Banyan security. And we also would appreciate your feedback on what you thought about today's webinar, and give us some ideas for some other programs. And your feedback does mean a lot to us. Also, if you do need a CPE credit, we want to make sure you fill that out so that you'll get your email tomorrow letting you know that you completed today's session. I want to say thank you to Banyan Security for being our sponsor today. And I want to thank all of you, wherever you might be, for joining us at our ISE Fireside webinar. I hope that all of you stay healthy and safe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.